Despite what you might think, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster really wasn't all that bad. In this video I'm going to show you why. First of all, let's look at the explosion itself.
Now please tell me how an RBMK reactor core explodes.
I can't.
Are you stupid?
Don't you feel silly? Don't you feel stupid?
You probably already know this, but the explosion at Chernobyl was a steam explosion, not a nuclear explosion. It didn't explode like a bomb would. To put it simply, the reactor got too hot too quickly, and this caused the water to turn into steam and explode, which blew the lid off the reactor. After this explosion, the fission chain reaction was halted. After the explosion, the reactor core was partially exposed and was emitting radiation. TV shows and documentaries give the impression that the radiation it was emitting was constant, as if it was still operational and producing energy.
Every atom of U-235 is like a bullet. Every gram of U-235 holds over 1 billion trillion of these bullets. That's in 1 gram. Now, Chernobyl holds over 3 million grams. Most of these bullets will not stop firing for 100 years.
But this is wrong. The destruction of the reactor stopped the fission process, and the radiation given off by the core was just from the energy it produced in the seconds before it exploded. Because of this, the radiation was at its greatest in the moments after the explosion and decayed exponentially. The majority of the radiation was removed by the smoke, which dissipated into the atmosphere harmlessly. In fact, the area immediately around Chernobyl was safe after only 8 days. With this in mind, we need to talk about the inverse square law. An inverse square law is any scientific law stating that a specified physical quantity is inversely proportional to the square of the distance from the source of that physical quantity. The fundamental cause for this can be understood as geometric dilution corresponding to point source radiation into three-dimensional space. Basically, what this means is that the further away you are from the source of emission, be it light, thermal radiation or gamma radiation, the less it affects you to an exponential degree. Imagine a bonfire. If you put your hand inside it, it will be hot enough to burn you, but you stand a step back, it will be comfortably warm. If you keep walking away from it, you will feel the heat much less until you can feel it at all. Let's say, for example, that the dosimeter reading 1 meter from the core is 15,000 roentgens. 10 meters away the reading will be 1,500 roentgens. 100 meters away will be 1.5 roentgens. 1 kilometer away almost undetectable. Now would be a good time to mention that the distance between Chernobyl and Pripyat is around 2.6 kilometers. Only 31 people actually died because of Chernobyl. These people were either workers inside Reactor 4 or the firefighters that immediately responded to the incident. However, this number constantly gets inflated to make the disaster seem worse. As you watch the following footage, remember that nobody in Reactor 1, 2 or 3 or from the town of Pripyat died from ARS, acute radiation exposure. So you're telling me that every single person on this bridge, which was 2 kilometers away, died, but most people in Reactor 4 along with everyone from the other reactors didn't die? Something doesn't add up. These huge figures come from attributing deaths from cancer many years later. This is largely because compensation was awarded to the families of anyone who was negatively affected by the Chernobyl disaster. Over $2.5 billion in today's money, which creates a personal incentive to attribute as many deaths to Chernobyl as possible. A study was done on the people who lived in Pripyat to see if their lives would be shorter due to the radiation exposure, but they found out the people of Pripyat on average actually live longer. Go figure. This situation reminds me of another historical event with an inflated death count. The reaction by everyone to the Chernobyl disaster can only be described as mass hysteria, especially in the Soviet Union. In documentaries, it's often implied that the Soviet Union was slow to react and didn't do enough. In fact, the opposite is true. All the people in Pripyat were made to evacuate against their will, and an exclusion zone of 30 kilometers was made, which is an overreaction to say the least. These people were never allowed to return to their homes even though the radiation was perfectly safe even on the day of the explosion. This exclusion zone remains even 36 years later, which is silly. Why on earth is this the case? Oh well, at least we got a good Call of Duty level out of it, bros. The efforts by the Soviet Union after the disaster were extremely costly, costing $68 billion in today's money, and were mostly unnecessary. Everyone knows about the story of dropping sand and boron onto the core with helicopters to absorb the radiation, but did you know this didn't work at all? It was later determined that none of the neutron absorbers made it onto the core. A few pilots died because of this. Oops. They were also worried that the mixture of materials they dropped onto it, which turned into a kind of lava, would melt through the concrete pad and get into the groundwater, so they dug a tunnel underneath it to place a heat exchanger. It turned out this was also unnecessary because it didn't happen. As an aside, you've probably seen this image before on social media. This is a blob of lava called the elephant's foot. It's usually captioned like, "This is the most dangerous room on Earth." You can probably guess, but this is bullshit. The radioactivity is far lower now, and here is a guy standing right next to it. In reality, the most dangerous room on Earth is probably the basement of Comet Pizza. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're wondering why I made this video, I don't have an agenda or anything, I just don't like being lied to, bros. Always remember to question everything and reach out for the truth. Don't fall for the anti-nuclear hysteria. It's the safest and cleanest form of energy. People will freak out about a tiny bit of radiation but don't care when toxic waste is added to their food. But that's for another video, so remember to subscribe. More videos to come.